The morning sun cast long shadows across the Norfolk Naval Base as Sarah Martinez walked through the main entrance. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her civilian clothes simple but neat. To anyone watching, she looked like just another visitor coming to handle routine paperwork or meet with personnel. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was anything more than an ordinary citizen going about her business. Sarah had driven 3 hours from Richmond to reach this place. The journey felt longer than usual, weighted with memories she had tried to bury for years. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter each mile, and now as she walked across the sprawling base, those same hands trembled slightly. She kept them at her sides, hoping no one would notice. The naval base buzzed with activity. Sailors in crisp white uniforms moved with purpose between buildings, the sound of boots on pavement mixed with distant ship horns from the harbor. Sarah had forgotten how overwhelming military bases could be, with their constant energy and underlying tension. Every sound, every sight brought back feelings she thought she had left behind. She made her way toward the administration building, following signs and directions from helpful personnel who pointed her in the right direction. Her mission today was simple, at least on paper. She needed to collect some documents related to her late brother's service record. Michael had died in a car accident 6 months ago, and she was finally ready to handle his affairs. The military paperwork had been sitting in a folder on her kitchen table for weeks before she found the courage to make this trip. As Sarah approached the main desk, a young clerk looked up with a professional smile. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" "I'm here about my brother's service records," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Michael Martinez. He served here about 8 years ago." The clerk nodded and began typing on her computer. "I'll need some identification and documentation proving your relationship to him." Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out the necessary papers. As she handed them over, she unconsciously pushed up the sleeve of her lightweight cardigan to check her watch. The movement was brief, lasting only a few seconds, but it was enough. Admiral James Thompson was walking past the reception area when he caught sight of the woman at the desk. He had been heading to a meeting with his senior staff, his mind focused on operational matters and budget discussions. But something made him glance toward the civilian area, and that glance changed everything. The tattoo on Sarah's wrist was small and might have gone unnoticed by most people. It was a simple design, no bigger than a silver dollar, partially hidden by her watch band. But Admiral Thompson saw it clearly in that brief moment when she moved her arm. His steps slowed, then stopped completely. The design was unmistakable to someone who knew what to look for. A stylized anchor intertwined with wings and a small star. It was not a tattoo you could get at any parlor in town. This particular symbol had very specific meaning, known only to a select group of people within the military community. It represented something that officially did not exist. Admiral Thompson felt his mouth go dry. He had seen that exact design only a handful of times in his 30-year career. Each time, it had been on someone who had been through hell and back in service to their country, someone who had volunteered for missions that most people could never imagine. Someone who had sworn oaths of secrecy that lasted long after their official service ended. The Admiral stood frozen, watching as Sarah completed her transaction with the clerk. His mind raced through possibilities, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The woman looked to be in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her clothes were casual, her demeanor calm but slightly nervous in the way civilians often were on military bases. Nothing about her screamed military background, yet that tattoo told a different story entirely. He thought about approaching her directly, but years of training held him back. If he was right about what that symbol meant, then this was not a conversation to have in public. There were protocols to follow, discreet inquiries to make, but he could not simply let her walk away without knowing more. Admiral Thompson stepped back into the shadows of a nearby corridor, positioning himself where he could observe without being obvious. He watched as Sarah collected her documents and thanked the clerk. She seemed relieved to have completed her business, shoulders relaxing slightly as she turned to leave. As she walked toward the exit, Sarah felt the weight of someone's gaze on her back. The sensation was familiar from her previous life, an instinct that had kept her alive during missions she could never speak about. She resisted the urge to turn around, instead maintaining her steady pace toward the doors. The feeling persisted as she crossed the parking lot to her car. Only when she was safely inside with the doors locked did she allow herself to glance back at the building. Through the windows, she could see figures moving about their daily routines, but no one seemed to be paying her particular attention. Sarah sat in her car for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. The documents she had come for were now tucked safely in her purse, but something felt different. The simple errand she had dreaded for months was complete, yet she had an unsettling feeling that this was not the end of something, but the beginning. She started the engine and pulled out of the parking space, unaware that Admiral Thompson was now making urgent phone calls from his office. She had no way of knowing that her brief appearance had set wheels in motion that would soon turn her quiet civilian life upside down. As Sarah drove through the base gates and merged onto the highway, Admiral Thompson was already requesting files that had been classified for years. He needed to confirm what he suspected, and he needed to do it quickly. The woman with the tattoo might think she had left her military past behind, but some secrets had a way of catching up with people when they least expected it. The drive back to Richmond gave Sarah time to think about her brother Michael. She missed their long conversations and his terrible jokes. He had always been proud of her, though he never fully understood what she had done during her years of service. The official records showed she had been a communications specialist, but Michael knew there was more to the story. He just never pressed her for details. Now, with Michael gone, Sarah felt more alone than ever. Her parents had passed away years earlier, and she had few close friends outside of work. Her job as a software consultant kept her busy, but did not provide the kind of deep connections she sometimes craved. Most days, she was content with her quiet life in Richmond, but moments like this made her realize how isolated she had become. The afternoon traffic was light, and Sarah made good time returning home. Her small apartment felt particularly empty after the bustling energy of the naval base. She placed the documents on her kitchen table next to the other papers related to Michael's affairs. Tomorrow, she would continue working through the bureaucratic maze of settling an estate, but tonight she just wanted to forget about everything for a while. Sarah changed into comfortable clothes and started preparing dinner. As she chopped vegetables for a simple stir-fry, her mind wandered back to the strange feeling she had experienced at the base. Something had felt off, though she could not pinpoint exactly what. After years of trusting her instincts in dangerous situations, she had learned to pay attention to such feelings even in civilian life. She pushed the thought aside as she cooked, focusing instead on the soothing routine of preparing a meal. The kitchen smelled of garlic and ginger as she heated oil in her favorite pan. These simple domestic tasks helped center her, reminding her of the peaceful life she had built for herself. After dinner, Sarah settled onto her couch with a cup of tea and a book she had been meaning to finish. But concentration proved elusive. Every few minutes, her mind drifted back to the naval base and that persistent feeling of being watched. She found herself touching the tattoo on her wrist, a habit she had developed whenever she felt anxious or uncertain. The symbol had been inked into her skin during a ceremony she could never describe to anyone outside her former unit. It marked her as part of an exclusive group, people who had undertaken missions that required absolute secrecy. Even now, years after leaving that life behind, she was bound by oaths that would never expire. Sarah had worked hard to become just another civilian, someone who blended into the background of ordinary life. She had a job that required no security clearance, lived in a city with no major military presence, and carefully avoided situations that might draw unwanted attention. For the most part, her strategy had worked perfectly. But tonight, as she sat in her quiet apartment, Sarah could not shake the feeling that her carefully constructed anonymity might be in jeopardy. The visit to the naval base had been necessary, but it had also been a risk. She had convinced herself that no one would pay attention to one woman collecting routine paperwork, but now she wondered if she had been naive. As the evening wore on, Sarah tried to distract herself with television and household chores. She organized papers, did laundry, and cleaned surfaces that were already spotless. But the uneasy feeling persisted, settling in her stomach like a cold weight. When she finally went to bed, Sarah found herself checking the locks on her doors and windows more carefully than usual. Old habits from her military days had never completely faded, but tonight they felt more urgent. She placed her cell phone on the nightstand within easy reach and made sure her keys were nearby. Sleep came eventually, but it was restless and filled with half-remembered dreams of missions and briefings from years past. Sarah woke several times during the night, listening to the normal sounds of her neighborhood and trying to convince herself that nothing had changed. But deep down, she knew that something had shifted during her visit to the naval base. The question was whether anyone else had noticed, and if so, what they planned to do about it. 3 days after Sarah's visit to the naval base, Admiral Thompson sat in his office reviewing classified files that had been retrieved from deep storage. The information he found confirmed his worst fears and answered questions that had haunted him for years. Sarah Martinez was not just any civilian with an unusual tattoo. She was someone he had been searching for without even realizing it. The file in front of him contained details that made his hands shake slightly as he read. 8 years ago, a joint operation between the Navy and other agencies had gone catastrophically wrong. A team of specialists had been sent on a mission that officially never happened. 3 members of that team never made it home. The 4th member had survived but disappeared shortly after returning to base. That 4th member was listed as Communications Specialist Sarah Martinez. Her official record showed a routine discharge followed by a complete disappearance from military systems. No forwarding address, no contact information, no trace of where she had gone after leaving service. It was as if she had simply vanished, which was exactly what she was supposed to do. Admiral Thompson remembered the aftermath of that failed mission. The investigation had been thorough but fruitless. Too many agencies had been involved. Too many classified programs intersecting in ways that made accountability nearly impossible. The families of the lost operatives had been told their loved ones died in training accidents. The survivor had been debriefed extensively and then allowed to disappear for their own protection. Now that survivor had unknowingly walked back into his world, and Admiral Thompson faced a dilemma that kept him awake at night. The woman he had seen collecting her brother's records was supposed to be dead, at least according to the story that had been carefully constructed to protect her. If the wrong people learned she was alive and accessible, her life would be in immediate danger. The Admiral closed the file and locked it in his personal safe. He had spent 3 days considering his options, but there was really only one choice. He needed to warn Sarah Martinez that her cover might be blown, and he needed to do it without alerting anyone else to her existence. The operation was delicate and would require resources he could not access through normal channels. Meanwhile, Sarah was beginning to notice changes in her daily routine that concerned her. Small things at first, like feeling watched while grocery shopping or noticing the same car in different locations throughout the week. Her old training kicked in, and she started varying her routes and paying closer attention to her surroundings. On Thursday evening, Sarah decided to test her suspicions. She left her apartment as if heading to the gym, but instead took a complex route through downtown Richmond, making random turns and stops. Within 20 minutes, she had confirmed that someone was following her. The realization sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the October weather. Sarah managed to lose her tail using techniques she had hoped never to need again. She doubled back through a parking garage, exited through a different level, and took public transportation to a part of town she rarely visited. Only when she was certain she was alone did she allow herself to think clearly about what was happening. Someone had connected her to her past, but she had no idea who or why. The possibilities were troubling. It could be foreign agents who had finally tracked her down. It might be elements within her own government who had decided she was a liability. Or it could be related to the failed mission that had cost 3 good people their lives and left her with scars that would never fully heal. Sarah found a payphone in a busy shopping area and made a call she had hoped never to make. The number connected her to an automated system that required a series of codes she had memorized years earlier. After navigating through several security protocols, she was transferred to a human operator. "I need to speak with Control," Sarah said, using the code name for her former handler. "Control is no longer available," came the reply. "This is Deep 6. State your situation." Sarah hesitated. She had never heard the code name Deep 6 before, which meant the old chain of command had been reorganized. That could be good or very bad, depending on who was now in charge of her file. "This is Nightingale," she said, using her operational name. "I think my cover has been compromised." There was a long pause before Deep 6 responded. "Nightingale is listed as inactive. What is your current location?" "Richmond, Virginia. I was recently at Norfolk Naval Base on personal business. Since then, I've noticed surveillance." Another pause. Longer this time. Sarah could hear typing in the background and what sounded like muffled conversations. "Nightingale, you need to implement Protocol 7 immediately. Do you understand?" Sarah's blood ran cold. Protocol 7 meant her situation was extremely dangerous and required immediate extraction from her current life. She would have to abandon everything she had built and disappear once again, this time possibly forever. "Confirmed," she said. "How much time do I have?" "Unknown. Maintain communication through the usual channels. We'll be in touch within 48 hours. The line went dead, leaving Sarah standing at the payphone with her heart racing. Protocol 7 had been designed for worst-case scenarios, and the fact that Deep 6 had authorized it without hesitation meant her situation was even worse than she had imagined. Sarah took a taxi back to within a few blocks of her apartment and approached carefully. Everything looked normal from the outside, but she had learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving. She entered through the building's parking garage and took the stairs instead of the elevator, listening carefully for any sounds that seemed out of place. Her apartment appeared undisturbed, but Sarah noticed subtle signs that someone had been inside. A book was positioned differently on her coffee table. The papers on her kitchen table had been moved slightly. Most telling, a piece of hair she always left in her dresser drawer was missing. Sarah moved quickly and efficiently through her apartment, gathering only essential items. She had practiced this evacuation routine many times during her active service, though she had never expected to use it as a civilian. Within 30 minutes, she had packed a small bag with clothes, documents, cash, and a few precious mementos, including her brother's military medals. Before leaving, Sarah took one last look around the apartment that had been her home for 3 years. She had been happy here, or as close to happy as someone with her background could manage. The quiet life she had built was about to end, and she had no idea when or if she would ever feel safe enough to try building another one. Sarah left her apartment through a rear exit that connected to an adjacent building. She had scouted this route when she first moved in, always planning for the possibility that she might need to leave quickly and invisibly. The route took her several blocks away before she emerged onto a main street where she could blend with other pedestrians. As she walked toward the bus station, Sarah's mind raced through everything that had happened since her visit to the naval base. Something about that trip had triggered this crisis, but she could not determine what. She had been careful to maintain her cover story and avoid drawing attention to herself. The only people she had interacted with were routine administrative personnel, unless someone had recognized her. The thought made Sarah's steps falter for a moment. During her active service, she had worked with many different people across various agencies. Most of those individuals had no idea what she really did, but a few had been briefed on her true role. If one of those people had seen her at the base, Sarah forced herself to keep walking while she considered this possibility. Admiral Thompson had been visible during her visit, along with various other senior officers. Any of them might have access to classified information about her past. But why would they wait 3 days to act? And why use surveillance instead of direct contact if they were trying to help her? The questions multiplied as Sarah reached the bus station and purchased a ticket to Washington, D.C. She chose the capital because it offered the most options for further travel and because she had resources there from her previous life. The bus would not leave for 2 hours, giving her time to make additional preparations. Sarah found a quiet corner of the station and used her phone to access encrypted email accounts she had not touched in years. The messages she found there made her situation clear. Multiple intelligence agencies were looking for someone matching her description in connection with recent activities by foreign operatives. Someone had leaked information suggesting that survivors of her old unit might be planning to sell classified information. The accusation was completely false, but Sarah understood how dangerous false accusations could be in the intelligence world. Once suspicion attached to someone with her background, proving innocence became nearly impossible. The safest assumption was that everyone would consider her a threat until proven otherwise. As she read through the messages, Sarah began to piece together what had happened. Her visit to the naval base had been noted and reported through routine intelligence channels. Someone reviewing those reports had connected her to the classified operation from 8 years ago. From there, paranoia and institutional memory had combined to create a threat assessment that painted her as a potential security risk. Sarah deleted the emails and disposed of the phone in a trash bin across the station. She would need to acquire new communication methods once she reached Washington, but for now, she was cutting all electronic ties to her current identity. The bus departure announcement echoed through the station, and Sarah joined the line of passengers boarding the vehicle that would take her away from Richmond and the life she had built there. As the bus pulled away from the station, she watched the familiar city lights fade into the distance. Admiral Thompson, meanwhile, was discovering that his attempts to locate and warn Sarah had triggered exactly the kind of attention he had hoped to avoid. His discreet inquiries had been noticed by people whose job was to notice such things. By Thursday evening, he found himself being questioned by representatives from multiple agencies, all wanting to know why a senior naval officer was suddenly interested in a supposedly dead operative. The Admiral tried to explain that he was concerned about the woman's safety, but his questioners were more interested in why he had recognized her in the first place and what he knew about her current activities. The interrogation was professional but firm, and Admiral Thompson realized he had inadvertently made Sarah's situation much worse. As Sarah's bus traveled through the night toward Washington, she had no way of knowing that the very person who had tried to help her was now being treated as a potential accomplice in whatever conspiracy the intelligence community imagined was brewing. The web of suspicion and misunderstanding was growing more complex by the hour, and Sarah was at the center of it all. Sarah arrived in Washington, D.C., as the sun was rising over the Potomac River. The city was already bustling with early commuters, providing perfect cover for someone who needed to disappear into the crowd. She had spent the bus ride planning her next moves, but first she needed to establish contact with Deep Six and get more information about the scope of the threat against her. The safe house Sarah remembered from her active service was located in a nondescript neighborhood in Arlington. She took the metro, changing trains twice and walking the final mile to ensure she was not being followed. The building looked exactly as she remembered it, a modest office complex that housed various small businesses serving as fronts for intelligence operations. Sarah used her old access codes to enter through a service entrance and made her way to the third floor. The hallway was empty except for the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. She knocked on a door marked with the number 312 in a specific pattern that identified her as a former operative seeking assistance. The door opened to reveal a man in his 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. Sarah had never seen him before, but he clearly knew who she was. "Nightingale," he said. "I'm Deep Six. We need to talk." The office behind him was spartanly furnished with basic furniture and communication equipment. Deep Six gestured for Sarah to take a seat while he secured the door and activated electronic countermeasures to prevent eavesdropping. "Your situation is more complicated than we initially thought," Deep Six began. "The person who spotted you at Norfolk Naval Base was Admiral James Thompson. He tried to research your background through official channels, which triggered automatic alerts in multiple intelligence databases." Sarah felt a mix of relief and concern. It was good to know that someone had recognized her out of genuine concern rather than malicious intent, but the consequences were clearly serious. "What kind of alerts?" she asked. "The kind that suggest you might be selling classified information to foreign agents," Deep Six replied grimly. "There's been chatter about survivors from your old operation being approached by hostile intelligence services. When your name appeared in Admiral Thompson's inquiries, some people jumped to conclusions." Sarah leaned back in her chair, processing this information. The failed mission 8 years ago had involved penetrating a terrorist network that was later discovered to have connections to state-sponsored intelligence operations. If enemy agencies were now trying to exploit survivors from that mission, it would explain the paranoia surrounding her reappearance. "What evidence do they have?" Sarah asked. "None," Deep Six admitted. "But in our business, suspicion often carries more weight than evidence. Right now, there are elements within the intelligence community who believe you've been compromised and are actively working against American interests." "And what do you believe?" Deep Six studied her carefully for a moment. "I believe you've been living quietly in Richmond for 3 years, working as a software consultant and minding your own business until you had to collect your brother's service records. But my opinion doesn't carry much weight with the people who matter." Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. She had sacrificed everything for her country, including the lives of 3 friends and her own chance at a normal life. Now that same country was treating her like a traitor based on nothing more than coincidence and paranoia. "What are my options?" she asked. "Officially, you have 2 choices: submit to protective custody and extensive debriefing, which could last months or years, or disappear so completely that even we can't find you." "And unofficially?" Deep Six hesitated. "Unofficially, Admiral Thompson has been asking a lot of questions about why his attempts to help you have been treated as suspicious behavior. He's suggesting there might be a third option." Over the next hour, Deep Six explained Admiral Thompson's theory. The Admiral believed that Sarah's reappearance was not coincidental, but was instead connected to renewed activity by the same networks her original mission had targeted. If that was true, then the threat was not Sarah herself, but whoever might be using her as bait to draw out other intelligence assets. "Thompson thinks someone wanted you to be seen at that naval base," Deep Six continued. "He believes your brother's death might not have been accidental." Sarah felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Michael's car accident had seemed random, a tragic result of wet roads and poor visibility. But if someone had orchestrated his death to force her out of hiding... "Do you have any evidence of this?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "We're investigating, but it will take time. Meanwhile, you're still in immediate danger from multiple directions. The people who think you're a traitor want to capture or eliminate you. If Thompson is right, the people who killed your brother want to use you as a stalking horse to identify other assets they can target. Sarah stood and walked to the small window overlooking the Arlington street. Below, people went about their normal lives, unaware of the deadly games being played around them. She envied their ignorance and their safety. "There is a fourth option," Deep Six said quietly. "But it's extremely dangerous." Sarah turned to face him. "I'm listening." "We could use you as bait, but on our terms. If someone is trying to flush out intelligence assets by targeting you, we could turn that against them. Set up a controlled operation where you appear vulnerable but are actually protected by layers of surveillance and backup. You want me to be a target. I want to catch the people who might have killed your brother and are definitely trying to destroy what's left of your old unit." Sarah considered this proposal while staring out at the city where she had once felt safe. The idea of deliberately putting herself in danger went against every survival instinct she had developed. But the alternative was spending the rest of her life running from shadows, never knowing if the next person she met might be an assassin or an agent sent to bring her in. What would this operation involve? Deep Six outlined a plan that was both simple and terrifying. Sarah would return to Richmond and resume her normal routine as if nothing had happened. Intelligence operatives would provide distant surveillance while she acted as bait to draw out whoever was targeting former members of her unit. When the enemy made their move, the surveillance teams would be ready to capture them. "How do you know they'll come after me directly instead of just watching from a distance?" "Because they need something from you. Information about other survivors, details about classified operations, or confirmation that certain assets are still active. Surveillance won't give them what they need. Eventually, they'll have to make direct contact." Sarah spent the afternoon considering her options while Deep Six made arrangements for the proposed operation. Each choice carried enormous risks, but doing nothing was not really an option. Someone had already found her once, and they would find her again no matter where she tried to hide. As evening approached, Sarah made her decision. She would return to Richmond and play the role of an unsuspecting civilian, while highly trained professionals watched for threats. It was not the quiet life she had hoped to maintain, but it offered the possibility of ending this nightmare permanently. Deep Six provided her with new communication equipment and detailed instructions for the surveillance protocols. Sarah would appear to be alone and vulnerable while actually being protected by assets she would never see. The operation would continue until they identified and captured the people responsible for targeting her unit. "One more thing," Deep Six said as Sarah prepared to leave. "Admiral Thompson wants to meet with you before you return to Richmond. He feels responsible for triggering this crisis and wants to help resolve it. Is that wise? Probably not, but he's been remarkably persistent. He also has access to resources and information that could be useful to our operation." Sarah agreed to the meeting, which was arranged for the following morning at a secure location in Georgetown. She spent the night in a safe house, trying to prepare mentally for what lay ahead. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of her brother and the friends she had lost during that mission 8 years ago. Admiral Thompson arrived at the Georgetown meeting location precisely on time. Sarah was struck by how tired he looked, as if the stress of the past week had aged him considerably. They met in a small conference room with Deep Six providing security oversight. "I want you to know how sorry I am," the Admiral began. "I was trying to help, but I made everything worse." "You couldn't have known," Sarah replied. "The system is designed to be paranoid about people like me." "Nevertheless, I feel responsible. I've been working with Deep Six to design an operation that will clear your name and identify the real threats." Admiral Thompson explained that his investigation had uncovered evidence of foreign intelligence activity targeting former members of classified operations. The pattern suggested a coordinated effort to identify and either recruit or eliminate American assets who possessed sensitive information. Your reappearance gave us the first concrete lead we've had, he continued. If we can trace the surveillance back to its source, we might be able to roll up an entire network. Sarah listened as the Admiral outlined additional safeguards and resources he could provide for the operation. His genuine remorse and determination to make things right impressed her, though she remained cautious about trusting anyone completely. "There's something else you should know," Admiral Thompson said. "We found evidence that your brother's accident might not have been random. Someone tampered with his car's braking system in a way that would cause failure under specific conditions." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Confirmation of her worst fears hurt more than she had expected, but it also clarified her resolve. The people responsible for Michael's death would pay for their crime, and she would make sure no other innocent family members suffered the same fate. "When do we start?" she asked. The operation began immediately. Sarah returned to Richmond that evening, moving back into her apartment as if she had simply taken a short trip. She resumed her work schedule and normal activities while invisible watchers monitored every person who came near her. For the first week, nothing unusual happened. Sarah went to work, bought groceries, and maintained the facade of ordinary civilian life, but she could feel the tension building, like the calm before a dangerous storm. On Thursday evening, as Sarah returned home from work, she noticed a man in a coffee shop across from her apartment building. He was trying to appear casual, but his positioning and body language marked him as professional surveillance. This was not one of the friendly watchers Deep Six had promised. This was someone else entirely. Sarah entered her building normally but immediately activated the emergency communication protocol Deep Six had given her. Within minutes, invisible assets were moving to surround the coffee shop while Sarah prepared for whatever was about to happen. The final confrontation came sooner than anyone expected. As Sarah unlocked her apartment door, she heard movement in the hallway behind her. She turned to see two people approaching, a man and a woman who moved with the fluid precision of trained operatives. "Ms. Martinez," the woman said in accented English, "we need to talk." Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward the concealed weapon Deep Six had provided, but she forced herself to appear calm and confused. "I think you have the wrong person," she said. "We know exactly who you are, Nightingale. We also know what you did 8 years ago, and we know what you can do for us now." The conversation that followed confirmed everything Admiral Thompson and Deep Six had suspected. The approaching operatives represented a foreign intelligence service that had spent years tracking down survivors from Sarah's original mission. They wanted information about American intelligence operations and were prepared to use extreme methods to get it, but they had walked into a carefully prepared trap. As soon as the foreign agents revealed their intentions, Deep Six's surveillance teams moved in from multiple directions. The coffee shop watcher was taken down silently while backup units surrounded Sarah's building. The capture operation was swift and professional. Within minutes, both foreign operatives were in custody, along with several support personnel who had been monitoring the situation from nearby locations. Sarah found herself surrounded by friendly faces for the first time in over a week. Deep Six appeared in her hallway as the last suspects were led away. "It's over," he said. "We got the whole network." Sarah leaned against her apartment door, feeling the weight of constant stress finally lifting from her shoulders. The people responsible for her brother's death were in custody, and the threat to other intelligence assets had been eliminated. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you get to choose. Your name has been cleared completely, and your cover has been officially restored. You can go back to your quiet life in Richmond, or we can offer you other options if you prefer a change of scenery." Sarah thought about Michael and the sacrifice he had unknowingly made. She thought about the 3 friends who had died on that mission 8 years ago, and she thought about the apartment behind her. where she had built a peaceful life that was now forever changed by recent events. "I think I'll stay here," she said finally. "But I want better security protocols and regular check-ins. I never want to go through this again." Deep Six nodded. "That can be arranged. Admiral Thompson also wanted me to tell you that he's put in for a transfer to Norfolk permanently. He says someone needs to keep an eye on things there." 3 months later, Sarah was back to her normal routine, though her life now included monthly meetings with intelligence handlers and sophisticated security measures around her apartment. She had used the insurance money from Michael's car to establish a scholarship fund in his name for children of military families. Sometimes, late at night, Sarah would touch the tattoo on her wrist and think about the price of serving one's country. The symbol had brought her danger, but it had also connected her to people who were willing to risk everything to protect her. In the end, that connection had saved her life and brought justice for her brother. Admiral Thompson kept his word about transferring to Norfolk, and he occasionally sent Sarah updates about improvements in security protocols for intelligence assets. Their brief encounter had changed both of their lives, proving that even the smallest actions could have profound consequences in the shadowy world where secrets and loyalty intersected. Sarah never forgot the lesson of that terrible week. Freedom and safety were fragile things, requiring constant vigilance and the willingness of good people to stand against those who would destroy them. Her quiet civilian life was a luxury paid for by others who continued to serve in the shadows, and she would never take that sacrifice for granted again.